Hope you're doing okay. So Flexor Digitorum Superficialis. That's a fun one to say. Ooh, hello, bud. Can y'all see this? Fine.
Let me
Okay.
just change the angle a little bit.
So the superficialis is the medial epicondyle right here, and it goes. This is the flexor, okay? So it goes right here, and then it goes to your digits, 2 to 5. Boop boop. And what it does, it splits at the end, and it just sits there. Then with the profundus, it is your medial epicondyle, same thing. And then you come down, it goes all the way to the point of your finger, so all the way to the point. Then your flexor pollicis longus, it comes to somewhere in the interosseous membrane. Yeah, membrane. And then it goes to your thumb, and it just sits at the little point, and that's it. Yeah? Got it? Good. Okay, moving on. And the nerves for that, for superficialis and profundus, it's going to be the anterior interosseous branch of the median nerve. And then for the flexor pollicis longus, it's also going to be the median nerve, that branch as well. Actions for those. So you got your superficialis, is your ba muscles, so you go down. And then your profundus, it's the claw, you little clench. And then longus is thumb flexion across the interphalangeal joints. To test those, all right, you ready? To test that. Camera ready? Okay. Get a close up on this one, Dr. Hackney.
Hold on.
Okay. All right, we have Courtney here. She's doing a great job. Thank you, Courtney. Okay, so to test.
This PT gig doesn't work out. She could be a hand model.
Yes. Drop it out right now. Okay.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
So for the superficialis, what you're going to do is have them flex their fingers without the digit, the very distal part. Then what you're going to do is you're going to push down, just very lightly, not too hard, okay? Don't come in hot, come in cold. So you're going to push down and hold that there. All right, and that's good. That's a 5. Okay, now your profundus is your little claws. You're going to have her flex those. Flex that for me. Again, coming in cold, and then you're going to warm it up, and then, yeah, that's it. And then for your pollicis longus, she's going to flex her thumb. You're going to bring it in and hold it there. And then we're going to pull it out with one finger. And then that's it. Ta-da!
All right, good.
Okay, we're done.
Okay, so let's go ahead and give Jasmine our attention now. Woo!
Okay, so I have extensor digitorum, extensor indices, and extensor digiti minimi. So extensor digitorum is going to attach on the lateral epicondyle of the humerus and run down on the posterior side of the arm to the extensor expansion of digits 2 through 5. It's innervated by the deep branch of the radial nerve, and that's going to extend the medial 4 digits at the MCP. Extensor indices is going to attach more on the posterior surface on the distal third of the ulna, ulna and the interosseous membrane, and run down to the extensor expansion of the second digit, or your index finger, innervated by the posterior interosseous nerve, which comes from the radial, and that's going to extend your second finger, or your index finger. And extensor digiti minimi is going to again attach at the extensor tendon of the lateral epicondyle of the humerus and run down to the extensor expansion of the 5th and little digit. And that's going to also extend the MCP joint. Okay, so I'm going to test I think that's innervated by the deep branch of the radial. I'm not sure if it's that. So I'm going to have Grace take your finger off the edge.
Let me redo the camera a little bit.
I think I'm missing. Okay, so then I'll have Grace, her hand, pronation, I'm going to have her flex her fingers, but keep the MCP joint extended here. To test the extensor digitorum, I'm going to hold here just for stability, and using one finger, push all 4 of hers down and have her resist me there. And then to test the extensor digiti minimi, we're going to have her in the same position, and I'm just going to apply a force of flexion right at the MCP of the digit, or of the 5th digit, and then extensor indices, same thing, still in the same position, and just supplying a force of flexion into that at the MCP. And that's all I got.
Okay. If I can, I'm not sure. I'll have to double check about the extensor indicis and the extensor digiti minimi. But I know for sure, and we were working really hard on this last time, that the extensor digitorum does not insert into the extensor expansion. Those intrinsics do, right? The interossei and the lumbricals. The extensor digitorum runs underneath the extensor expansion and then attaches to the dorsal base of the second phalanx. Okay, so again, this is really takes a lot of concentration to understand how extension of the fingers works. And so work hard on it, but that was good. But I wanted to be clear that those muscles don't attach into the extensor expansion; they run underneath. And maybe what was like screwing you up a little bit is it changes names as it goes underneath the extensor expansion. It's called the distal slip, usually. Okay. All right, but those were good tests. All right, great.
Start by doing the test.
Hold on. If we attend to Caleb. All right.
All right, so the first one we're going to test is the Abductor Pulses. And so I'm going to have the wrist laying on the table, hand in neutral position. Then you're going to have the thumb just kind of in neutral, slightly extended. And you are going to pull on the medial portion of the thumb towards you, so they're going to resist you. Okay. And wait, that's actually false. I did that backwards. Okay, so I'm going to be pulling in, and he's going to be pushing out. So resist my pull. Okay. And then for the extensor Pollicis brevis, you're going to be pulling, same position, and you're going to be pulling at the base of the first MCP. And so resist my pull down. 3. And for the longest, you're going to just do it.
Oh, you know what? The people can't see right now because of the.
Okay. So then you're going to do it at the distal MCP. Resist my pull. Okay. So that was for extensor
All right. Well, go ahead and continue.
That was a 3.
With demonstrating the muscles.
Alright, so the Adductor Pulses.
Well, let me get the camera in the right view here.
Alright, so it's going to attach at the posterior portion of the ulnar, radius, and interosseous membrane, and then it runs down to the first MCP of the first phalange. Then you're going to have, okay, so then the extensor Pollicis brevis is going to attach at the distal 1/3 of the radius, yes, and then it's going to attach at the first MCP. And then for the extensor Pollicis longus, it's going to attach in the same place on the radius, and then attach at the dorsal aspect of the second MCP.
Okay. Well, let me just
They're innervated by radius.
okay. So let me. That's good. You can go ahead and relax. Okay. You can go ahead and take a, or you can stay here if you. But I'm just going to show some stuff. Okay. All right. So does we talked about this I think a bit. Does is the abductor pulses really much of an abductor? Yes or no? No, it's not. It's mostly an extensor. And it's an extensor of the metacarpal. So it attaches to the dorsal base of the first metacarpal, that's the abductor. And it runs almost exactly underneath the extensor brevis. And the extensor brevis is the brevis because it attaches on the base of the first phalanx, and then the extensor longus attaches on the base of the distal phalanx. Okay, so to test them, I'll tell you what, is that Logan, right? Okay, good. So stand around. Okay, and yeah, this is actually going to work pretty good. Let's have you step back toward Caleb a little bit. Okay, here, this is good. Okay, so for the abductor, the resistance is here on the distal end of the first metacarpal. Ready? More an extension really than abduction. Hold, good. And then for the brevis, it's on the distal end of the first phalanx. Ready? Hold. And then for the longus, you stabilize like this. And then the distal end of the distal phalanx. Ready? Hold. Okay. Good. Great. All right.
So I've got the inner oci, and I'll start with the dorsal inner oci. What they do is they abduct, but they only abduct 2, 3, and 4. You have digimini and abductor over there. So they attach to the metacarpals, the bases of the metacarpals, and like he said, they go up into the extensor expansions. Some people say they go up to the base of the proximal phalanxes, but
No, they do.
and both.
That's
Yeah.
why they're abductors too.
Okay.
Because they have two kind of attachment points into the extensor expansion and into the ulnar or radial base of the.
Okay. They attach to both sides of digit 3 and then one side of digits 2 and 4. They are innervated by the deep branch of the ulnar nerve, C8T1, and like I said, they abduct. So, to test the dorsals, have you lay the hand flat.
I'll get for you.
And you want to make sure to push around the MIP. And so the abduct, so you want to push from the lateral side of digit 2, the lateral side of digit 3, and the medial, the medial side of digit 4 is backwards, which is split. So that's the dorsal inner oci. For the palmar inner oci, they attach as well to the bases of the metatarsals. And what they do is they adduct, so they're going to attach, for digit 2 is going to attach right there, and it's going to go up into the same digit, because it's going to be pulling it towards the axial line. And same thing for, it's going to be digits 2, 4, and 5, because it's going to be pulling it towards 3, you don't have one on digit 3. And it also inserts into the extensor expansion, helps out there. Innervated by a deep branch of ulnar nerve, C8T1, and like I said, they deduct. So in order to test that, for digit 2, you're going to go onto the medial side, and she's going to resist me inward, and then for digits 4, you're going to go on the lateral side, inward, and same thing for digit 5. And last but not least, for the lumbar pulls, they actually attach to the tendons of Flexor, Digitorum, Profundus, and they insert specifically onto the extensor expansion. So you would, I guess, you'd have a tendon, and it'd be in the same general area. The MIP joint is the important thing there, and you have one on every, digits 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it'd be roughly right about that length right there. And they are innervated by 2 nerves. The lateral 2 are the median nerve, and the medial 2 are the ulnar nerve. and together they do all the roots, C5, T1. And what they do is they flex at the MCP joint, and they extend at the IP joints. And so in order to test that, you're going to have to do it 2 different ways. For extension at the IP joints, you're just going to apply pressure and flexion. And then for the MCP joint, you're going to want to go up a little bit more proximal, and she's going to resist me like that. So, that's that.
Okay, good. Hey, so what Charles described about the lumbricals, that was really good. The interossei also do the same thing with this position. This position of flexion of the MCP and extension of the IPs, and are also probably actually contributing more to the extension of the DIPs. It is a good way to test with the AB and adduction, like Charles said, because the lumbricals do not do that. So the interossei have these 2 functions, this as well as that things that they do by inserting into the extensor expansion. The lumbricals have exactly one thing. Okay, so that was really good.
Great.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's perfect.
Does that help?
You are.
Does that help? I know, right? Okay, so I have the thenar muscles, all 4 of them. So, it's rough life. So basically all of them, they attach the base down here of the joint and go up, but specifically for the Adductor Pulses, it's more of the base of the metatarsal bone of the first digit here, and then it kind of goes up here, and it's on the medial side, because, you know, it does some adducting there. So then the Abductor Pulses, kind of the same thing, except for it's more on the bones of the hand, so it's on the scaphoid here, and when it goes up, it'll go up to the proximal of the first metatarsal joint bone, but it'll go on the lateral side. And then basically the same thing for the Flexor Pollicis Brevis.
I think we should rename it the Flexor.
The Flexor, okay. Flexor Pollicis Brevis, guys, change it in the netter. So it's just a little bit further over on the capitate muscle, but same thing goes up there on the lateral side. And then the opponent pollicis, it's the exact same thing, just on the I always can't say that, triquetrum bone.
That was fine.
Thank you. I practiced on it. And the flexor retinaculum. So those are them. And all of them are by the median nerve, deep median nerve, except for the adductor pulses, because that one is the deep ulnar. I guess I need to go on this side, don't I? So for the adductor pulses, so there's an oblique and a transverse head, but they kind of just test the same because it's a little rough if you have to separate those 2 of them. So you have their hand in pronation here, and then what you want to do is you stabilize the metatarsals of the other 4 digits, if you can see it that well.
Yeah,
and
actually
then,
really good.
okay, so they're going to try to adduct their thumb, and I'm giving pressure here to try to abduct them. So just resistance is given there. So then for the abductor, Pollicis Brevis, which he kind of talked about a little bit before, just a little bit ago. So you have their hands like this, and they're trying to go up, and you're just pushing down. And you want to get on that proximal bone there, because you don't want to mess with the distal. So then we got the abductor. So their hands in supination here. Oops, excuse me, I just did that one. The Flexor Pollicis Brevis. So same thing, neutral here. And they'll want to bring it across their palm there. And you want to apply pressure and try to break them. And then for the opponents, it's almost the same thing. So they'll try to still bring their thumb across, but you'll apply pressure further down on the metatarsal bone down there. And you always want them to keep their thumb in extension. You don't want them to be abduction. And that's all she wrote.
Is a little bit different as well. So we will just go through this list. Whenever you palpate these areas, just like other areas, it's very much so skin and then bone. There's not a lot between, so don't be pushing very hard on these areas. And with the carpal bones, you're not going to really necessarily be able to say, you know, feel the separation in the joints between each one. There might be people out there that say that they can, but you know, you're just basically going to have to use your own anatomy to think about kind of where the bones are located at in space.
Okay, and please do this while you're watching it.
Yeah. So we're just going to take the list and just go down the list as we kind of get through it. We'll take kind of frequent breaks just to kind of walk around and go through these areas. So we'll start with the basis of the head of the ulna, the distal radial ulnar joint line, ulnar styloid process, and the tricletorum. And use your anatomy notes, your pictures, so you can kind of go through it as well, because there are 3 carpal bones that all start with T, and they all sound the same, but they're all different. So the fun part about it. So ulnar side of the wrist, I'm looking for the head of the ulna. It's going to be the smaller of the 2. And if you have a hard, the whole thing with this is that you're trying to really find the separation between the carpal bones and where the head of the ulna is at. And appreciate more on the dorsal part of it, but we're going to follow it around and feel for the edges of the ulna. One way that you can make sure that you're on the ulna is by just easily doing a slight radial and ulnar deviation. If the bone under you is really moving a lot, you're probably on the carpals. So you need to come and find the ulna head a little bit better. And this is a great way to find the separation between the ulna and the carpal bones. So again, you can also do the slight flexion and extension of the wrist. You're going to feel those carpal bones rocking, and you can feel for the separation in the joints. And then we're going to make our way over towards the radial portion, the radial head on this side of the dorsal. And again, we're just going to appreciate the separation between the radius and the ulna, between the 2. One thing you can also do is when you find the radial portion in the ulnar head, you can grab them by, grab each one with the thumb and index finger and actually just kind of rock them back and forth against each other. You'll feel for that movement. As well, if you hold them and you do a little bit of kind of pronation and supination, you'll feel for that rotation in the movement of the 2 joints against each other as well, okay? So it's just a way that you can kind of play to make sure that you're on the right section of it. As well, we're going to find, and since we're both here, we're going to go ahead and jump down and find the radial styloid process and the ulnar styloid process. So again, just the styloid process just comes to the tip, the side of the ulna. So I'm going to find the head, come directly to the ulnar side, and then again, just a slight rocking of radial and ulnar deviation. You're going to be able to feel for that very end point of the ulnar. And I was actually, as I rock him, so if I move way into radial deviation, you're gonna be able to feel it maybe a little bit better than back in the ulnar. And then same thing on the radial side. We're going to find the radial styloid process, rocking back and forth. And again, trying to feel to differentiate the carpals from the radius as well. And then, let's see. Let's go ahead and do kind of the most, the first row of the carpals. So, and then we'll break and we'll practice. So, again, finding the ulnar styloid process, the head of the ulna. If I fully radial deviate, so if I get into radial deviation, I'm going to come off of that joint and onto my first carpal bone, right on the side here. The very first one that you're going to run to is the tricletoral bone on the side. Easiest way to find it, full radial deviation, right on the ulnar side, first bone that you're going to hit, okay? Same thing, you do the same thing on the other side. So I'm on the radial side, underneath the thumb as I fully ulnar deviate. The first bone that you're going to feel as you separate on that side is the scaphoid. So you're going to feel for that scaphoid on the dorsal side. And then as I stay on that scaphoid and I palpate towards the midline of the wrist, you'll feel where it kind of comes up onto a hump, and then it feels like that you're not really on anything. You're in the middle of the wrist, but it almost feels kind of like a cavity. This is right where the lunate is at. So to feel for the lunate a little bit better, we can go into wrist flexion, and then as you go into extension, you're going to lose it a little bit, but it's going to fall into that cavity. So wrist flexion, it comes out. You'll feel a little bit better. But just keep a finger there and you'll feel it kind of move underneath your finger. So let's do that. Let's practice these. So we have the ulnar, the ulnus. Just looking at it, you would expect to just be able to know kind of where some of this stuff is at, but we'll still go through it. So let's start on the ulnar collateral and radiocollateral ligaments. There is a stress test that you can do for each one of these. I mean, they're pretty straightforward. So whenever you want to stress test any type of collateral ligament, you're just trying to get extra stress on it. So if you're doing the collateral ligaments, basically what you're going to be doing is trying to put extra stress in there while you can even add a little bit of a kind of almost like a shear type of motion to it. So if you're thinking about the collateral ligaments, to be able to feel them, you're going to be able to get more stress on them as you go in the opposite direction. So the ulnar collateral ligament goes from the styloid process through the joint to the carpal bone. So you're going to more or less radial deviate to feel the tightening of that ligament. So it's just going to fill in the space. And the same thing on the other side as you ulnarly deviate, you're feeling for the styloid process and coming down, and you're going to feel for that kind of bounce of that ligament in that area. So some ways that you can just stress it is just by stretching it. So I'm just going to go into radial and ulnar deviation and just put extra stress. You can also kind of take them there and even add a little bit extra by movement of the radius and ulna on it as well too. You're just testing each side as you take it to the end length. Okay. So those are just basic stress tests on it. Now, if we're going to the other, the more, I guess, distal portion of the carpal bone, we're going to, best way to find kind of the next row is by finding that first row again. So I'm going to move into ulnar deviation, find the scaphoid, and then coming up towards the base of the first MP. The bone that sits between them is the trapezium. And so you're going to palpate up. Another thing that you can do is just have them, you can move the thumb for them. So I'm finding kind of the shaft of that first MPP coming down towards the joint line. And again, almost all this, I like to have them in some sort of ulnar deviation. So I'm coming down towards here until I find kind of the gap between the two bones. And again, move the thumb, feel for movement, and you're going to feel for that small itty bitty bone between the scaphoid, where you just were pushing, and the base of the first MTP. Okay? And then after that, more on this dorsal side, you're going to feel for the capitate. So the best way to find this is from the third or the middle finger. You're going to feel for the shaft of the MTP as it comes down. It will raise up toward as you get towards the end of it. And then just knowing where you're at in space, I know that at the base of that third MTP is the capitate. Okay, so I'm just in that area there. As well, there's an important tubercle called Lister. So Lister's tubercle. I can almost draw kind of a straight line down from the capitate in third, and it's going to be on the radius, but it is in between, kind of in that joint space, but you're going to feel for that kind of raised portion of that tubercle as it comes up. So it's definitely raised. It's not very prominent on some people, but yeah, general area.
In fact, it's not prominent because it's surrounded by tendons, and its job actually is to serve as an anatomical pulley for the extensor pollicis longus. And so the fact that it's there improves its angle of application and improves its length tension curve a little bit. So, you have the abductor pulses and the extensor brevis that are more on the radial and volar side of the side of the wrist and thumb, and then the extensor longus is more coming from the dorsal side. And the reason that it's doing that is in part because of it's going around the Lister's tubercle. So it goes on the ulnar side of the Lister's tubercle, and then it heads toward the thumb.
Okay, so I think that's just about everything.